Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a discussion session that's going to be led by John Lund. So this was all up to this point. We've been talking about the ACI 563 that were just issued that are come out that are new document. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about the next generation. John's the incoming chair. He had his first meeting as chair of 563 yesterday. Just to introduce him, he's the principal and head of forensic engineering at Martin & Martin, and he's the new chair of 563.
All right, well, thanks for sticking around for the last portion of this session. I hope this was at least somewhat informative. 563 is a new document. It's not unlike what you're used to in 301, but it's new, certainly brand new for the repair industry. And what I'd like this last, I think we've got maybe 15 minutes. I'd like this last portion of the presentation to be more audience participation. So if you can, if you have some comments, please go to the mic at the back. I've got this mic here, and we've got our presenters here. What you see up on the screen is what we see, what the committee sees as where do we go from here. We have just put out the specifications that you've just seen. These are now published. They're available on the website as of now. And the committee has just reconvened starting yesterday and with the charge of, okay, in the next 3 years, when we put out a new modification, the new edition of this specification, what do we want to do? Where do we see the biggest need in the repair industry for additional specifications? The specifications that you see up on the screen are what we came up in our committee meeting as what we see as perhaps the greatest needs in the repair industry. I will tell you that there has already been some work done on these specifications, and the ones that are probably closest to being completed would be the repairs to architectural concrete, the repairs to precast concrete, and the one at the very bottom, which is corrosion. But there's also been some significant work on others, and as the chair of the committee, I would like to get some input from you guys in terms of what you think we need. And if we don't get a whole lot of participation, I'm going to ask these guys to give their opinions, but we're really very interested in yours. Obviously, the mitigation of corrosion is a huge topic and would likely involve several sections of different types of materials or methods that can be used to address the huge problem of corrosion in the industry. So, if somebody's brave enough, please.
First of all, I thank the committee and the ACI putting, is it?
You're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Putting this nice document, and I can see that you have the new building and the existing building kind of parallel, and the 318, 562 and 301, 563 is a nice setup. As I pointed out earlier, there are some missing, I didn't see the document in complete, so I cannot just say that there are a lot of missing information, but from the presentation, I realized that there could be a lot of missing information on the precast, pre-stress, post-tension structures, external post-tensioning, all this stuff. And I know that it is a lot of work to be done. This is being the first document, so over time we may have a lot of information as one go-to documentation for every single repair that you can encounter. But lately I see that within ACI, within many different committees, I went to 301, I went to 562, 423, 318. There seems to be kind of I am not a native speaker of English, so if I say something, don't get offended. There is no kind of coordination among the committees that does similar kind of work, and 423 may not know what is happening in 563, and 301 may not know what is happening in 562. That is what my observation is. It may be wrong. I'm just observing from that. So with that said, this 563 committee, did it approach the other committees and other organizations like PCI, PTI, because PTI has its own documentation on how to do the repair on postage structures. And I believe the same thing with the PCI. So did you reach out to those people? I don't know whether we have any PTA representation here or PCA representation here. So I'm just throwing this one. How do you coordinate those things?
No, that's completely fair. And yes, we do. We do a lot of that. Within ACI itself, we actually have a committee that meets, that is, their sole purpose is to do that coordination within ACI. That committee is called the TRRC, the TAC Repair and Rehabilitation Committee, and it meets with the chairs of all the repair-oriented committees and any other committee chairs that are interested, and frankly, any other participant, member that is just interested in attending the meetings can attend. And the sole purpose of that committee is to perform that type of coordination. And then I believe the second part of your question was, well, how does ACI reach out to, say, the PTI or ICRI or these other committees that also prepare standards and guides to coordinate our work? And we do the best we can. We've got memorandums of understanding which allow the sharing of documents with ACI, and I know that there are some within PTI, for example, that we have the ability to share. So we're doing our best. We certainly don't feel a need to repeat work that has been done in other committees. If we're able to, for example, I understand that PTI has some guides for the repair of post-tension structures, but I'm not aware that they actually have a specification. So we're going to try to work out and coordinate with those committees, and I believe that's extraordinarily important.
I actually, with the PTA also, and they have a very great documentation, DC-80 document that shows the evaluation and repair. And that was also kind of referred in 301 and 562. Not the 301, 562. I was in the 562 committee, and I brought this one. So my point is, the voluntary organization like ACI, PTA, and PCI, they need a better coordination so that the professional engineers like us or the contractor, they don't need to go to multiple different documentation to do it.
I'd like to give a little bit more of a plug on TRRC. I'm the victim that chairs the committee. It meets at Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. when there is absolutely nothing else for you to be doing but coming to this meeting. But breakfast is not provided, which is kind of a standing joke with us. Anyhow, we're also trying to make an effort to incorporate documents and knowledge from other organizations. We don't have all the connections. We need that help from you. Documents are a living, breathing evolution, and we want to keep making them better. One major help has been when organizations allow their guides and reports to be available to their members as a PDF download. I commend ACI for doing that. The same is true for NACE, SSPC, ICRI. But international standards, we have a pretty big gap for what's going on internationally. So if you know of things, if you have information that would be useful, please pass it along to us. We want the best documents we can produce. Sure. Repair is a huge industry. We don't know how large it is, but it has an unacceptable failure rate. And for concrete to reach its true potential, we have to continue to improve the repair of it too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a general comment about, this is the presentation from BASF on proprietary materials, and this is something that we found with the repair of existing structures using FRP overlays, so fiber reinforced polymer overlays, and it was actually a BASF specified product. The corresponding ASTM had a different sample size than the reported values by BASF, and I'm not trying to pick on BASF because we use their products. We really like the company because of their quality assurance. But what we found is that the reported values were based on a sample size of 20 samples, so a population, and the corresponding ASTM was based on a requirement for 5 samples. So we ran into a problem in trying to interpret this data, because the 5 samples led to a possibility. If you grab five of those samples out of the population of 20, you could end up with a value that came in lower than the manufacturer specified value, or it came in higher than the manufacturer specified value. So this is just kind of a general comment about interpreting of data sheets. But you got to pay attention to sample size, what your proprietor says, and what your ASTM says. Thank you.
If I had a choice between having a population of 20 samples or a population of 5 samples, I'd go for the 20 samples every time.
Yeah,
I happen to work for BASF, but the more data you have, the better decisions you can make.
Right.
It's when you don't have information, you're making this, I'm trying to think of the right term, wild, crazy guess.
Right.
About where you should really be. So I don't know the specifics of why we chose to publish data for 20 samples as opposed to 5, but in general terms, I would think a population of 20 would be a better sampling.
Sure,
and
it would
show
be,
the
but
true
it's
variation
driven
you
by
would get.
Cost is the whole thing is that this test was D3039 or D7565, and it's a tinsel test of an FRP sample. So it's a field manufactured sample, and then it's cut. There's a process where they mill these down to a 10-inch by 1-inch thick sample, and they test them. And so the problem is that the contractor doesn't want to pay for 20 tests. They want to pay for 5 because that's the minimum required by the ASTM.
So again, in the ASTM, you would have guidance in the precision and bias section
Right.
to be able to see if you have outliers, if you're within the acceptable range of variation of those samples. Someone with more of a background in statistics can provide you with that information to see if you're real or Memorex.
Yep. Right.
So.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others that have ideas in terms of really what I'm looking for input on is which of these documents the industry feels like is the greatest need? Yes, please.
I'm from Florida, so obviously mitigation of corrosion is a big deal for us. And I just wanted to, I guess, give some information. You may or may not be aware that NACE has a wealth of information on corrosion of steel and concrete. And that may be another source that you may want to draw from in compiling some type of repair specification. Primarily, one of the problems, the biggest problem I see, at least what I'm doing, is corrosion of steel in balconies. Whether it's condos, apartments, hotels, everything. You could spend entire lives, several of them, just repairing and working on just balconies in Florida themselves. And it's a big problem because condominium associations have to pay or have to make the decision, and the people living there basically have to pay through necessity. So if they get it fixed, I was on one job where they had all the balconies were knocked off completely, full depth repair, replaced, and in 7 years, they had the problem again. So they weren't very happy, obviously. So I think, at least in my case, mitigation of corrosion is huge, and maybe you have to get into specifics, balconies, bridge decks, and so on and so on.
I think that the committee also agrees that corrosion, the mitigation of corrosion is a very high priority. We've been working on that one. It's just such a ginormous topic. There's so much to talk about. But I appreciate your feedback, and the committee agrees that that's something that affects all of us in the repair industry and it needs to be a high priority. I think we have time just for one more.
Yes, thank you. I've been in this practice for 8 years ago, I came to one of these conferences. I had met somebody trying to do low alloy rebars, MMFX. We have heard about it, but we haven't done much about that. I have successfully done several buildings using MMFX rebars, and I did one 5 years ago in one of the most corrosive environments, which is in Okinawa, Japan. I just went there a few months ago, and I went and inspected that building. There is no sign of corrosion, but everywhere else, all those rebars, pump is falling off and all that. And we saw one bleeding. That bleeding was the tie bars, tie wires. And we just went, oh, it's a tie wire that was bleeding. But I have done several jobs, very successful, using MMFX. But in us, like the gentleman said, oh, 6, 7 years ago, they come back with the corrosion. Why we don't try to push a little bit more, getting more research using tie bars like MMFX, in such a way that we avoid the problem. We're not in the medical industry. They know they have a cure for the common cold, but they don't, because they have a way to making a lot of money. For us, I'm just wanting to let you guys know, there is an alternative to avoid corrosion, but we have to convince the client, hey, you're going to spend maybe 10-15% more, but you get a long-term performance of the building. And if you want, we can talk. You can talk to me and all that, or somebody else of the industry. But there is a way to avoid corrosion, because we are all the time mitigating. I do a lot of mitigations a lot. But when I get to do a new building, my first thing is to try to convince the client of doing that. And I do a lot of work in the Pacific, which is in Guam and all those places, which are very corrosive sensitive. I'm not sure if this is part of the deal, but I'm trying to help to cure the problem.
Sure, no, I understand. Yeah, MMFX, the low alloy bars, are certainly a tool in the toolbox. One thing that isn't talked about a whole lot, I mean, there are stainless steel bars as well. I don't see those being used a whole lot, but in the repair industry, the idea is if you've got a small patch, installing, a couple of bars is not the same as repairing the entire structure. But I appreciate the input. I mean, it's certainly a tool that all of us need to consider. I think we're out of time. I thank all of you for coming here on a Wednesday morning and listening to a presentation on specifications. I really think our presenters did an outstanding job. So if you wouldn't mind, one more round of applause for our presenters.